Alright you guys, so I'm trying to crank out a lot of content for you guys, and I looked at my analytics, and one of the most viewed videos that I have, aside from other things, is information on my military life. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about officer versus enlisted, and maybe this will help you if you're deciding whichever to join, which route to go. I know this was a decision that a lot of people asked about, so hopefully this will help. So if you don't know, I am in the Air Force, and currently I am an officer. A lot of people have a lot of questions, basically the basic officer versus enlisted. An officer is basically, I'm trying to compare this, I'm going to talk about it in more of a civilian term versus a military term. So those of you who don't really understand, or you're thinking about joining and you haven't joined yet, this can kind of help you make a decision. This is from a officer's point of view. Let me go ahead and say this disclaimer right now. At no point am I condoning you to join one side versus the other. They're both equal in my eyes, and I'm just telling you from my point of view and an officer's point of view how things are when you join the military sector. Sorry, I have a lot of flyaways going on. So basically, like I said, I joined the Air Force as an officer. So basically, to join the Air Force as just like a basic officer, you need to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. Usually it's master's preferred. So you need to find out from your recruiter and talk to them and ask them, you know, what are the degree requirements and yada yada yada. So basically, my parents are both prior military. They were enlisted. My dad spent 26 years in the Air Force as a cop, basically, and he loved it. He promoted super fast, super smart. So one thing that he always wanted for us, if we joined, he didn't want us to go in as enlisted. He wanted us to go in as officers. That's just kind of my dad's thing. He always wants better for me and my sister. So I originally, graduating high school, I honestly was undecided, and I remember in my yearbook marking undecided when we had to turn in what the seniors were doing, because I knew I wanted to go in cheer. I was a competitive cheerleader, and I ended up getting a full ride scholarship, so thank God. But I remember thinking, like, maybe I should just enlist so I don't have to pay for college if I don't make the team. And my dad was like heavily against that, and he's like, one thing that I wish I did was I wish I got my degree right out of high school. So my dad joined at 18 or 19, and I went ahead and got my degree first. I graduated college at the age of 20, and then after that I pursued getting my application submitted. I'm not going to go through that whole process because I will talk about that in another video, and I kind of mentioned it in my previous Air Force videos. But essentially, the difference between an officer and an enlisted airman or enlisted branch officer doesn't matter. Basically, officers are like managers, supervisors. Enlisted are kind of like the technicians and more of the worker bees. So as an officer, a lot is expected of you. You have a certain standard, there's unspoken rules, there's a lot more politics, and you have a lot less I don't want to say a lot less friends, but I'm going to keep it real for you guys. I'm going to be honest. I feel like in my today, like walking in, there are so many people that I met who are really cool and I would love to have a friendship with, but really they're enlisted, and that's kind of frowned upon. Not for you to be nice or friendly or support each other. They definitely, the Air Force doesn't care when it comes to rank structure, but one thing that's frowned upon and written into the Uniform Code of Military Justice is no fraternization of any kind. So that can include inappropriate friendships, inappropriate relationships, intimately, non-intimately. You just don't mix with, when you're an officer, with enlisted. And it can be kind of lonely because usually when you're an officer, you are one of, 52 enlisted people that you oversee, and it's just kind of you. So if you are single or new, or you're trying to make friends, 9 times out of 10 the people that I run into are enlisted, and then of course I have to keep that boundary. As an enlisted airman or branch or whatever, you're basically like considered a worker bee. So I feel like there's a lot more programs to develop enlisted men and women, just because most of the time they're starting from high school. They don't have any degree. Usually the Air Force will pay for you to get your associate's degree and your bachelor's degree when you're enlisted. So there's I feel, a lot more programs for enlisted, just because as an officer, you're kind of seen like you're already started your career. So you already took that extra step to do it on your own. You don't need help. Enlisted is kind of like they groom and they grow their enlisted. There's a lot more of them. There's a lot more groups for enlisted. You have more time to kind of have, I don't want to say it's like fun, but you have more time to have less responsibility. Whereas an officer, you're like basically a parent and you should know better. Basically, if I could compare it to the real world. Again, my answers are giving you guys analogies for the real world. They are my opinion and my opinion alone. So I just want to keep reiterating that, because there might be some people who disagree with me. Basically, I think when it came down to me joining as an enlisted person versus an officer, not only did my dad help motivate me and kind of mold me into that role, because he definitely wanted that for himself, but he was happy being a chief and he was good at it. So he wanted just better for his daughters. But not only that, I think I really wanted to finish my degree. And I didn't want to do the things that my dad had told me that he had to do, and working underneath people who were not the best for him. Those are his experiences, but hearing him tell me stories about how basically there was so much that he wished he didn't have to deal with as an enlisted person, that I was like, okay, I'd rather go officer than anything. So once I decided to do that, and I worked on my degree and I graduated and I was in contact with a recruiter, then you had to basically adopt the different laws that they have for officer versus enlisted. Now, there's nothing wrong with enlisted, so I want to just go over, if you really do feel like you would rather go in as an enlisted personnel, these are just some of the things that I notice is most of the time they work underneath people, almost 100% of the time. You do have to render a salute to officers, so that would just be like a right-handed salute of any rank. There's a lot more, like I said, just different groups that you can do, different ways to get involved. And most of the time when my base puts out events and stuff, most of the time they're catering more towards like the single enlisted airmen, because they know they're young or because they're new or they're fish out of water and they really need that special one-on-one attention. So if you're willing to kind of do any of that stuff, that's more of the enlisted side. There's also different jobs, like being like a first shirt, which is essentially like basically your administrator, but just focusing more on the people, like the health, the wellness, the discipline. If you're more interested in having that as like your sole job, then enlisted might be a route for you. If you're more interested in having the military pay for your degree first before you ever paying for anything, then the enlisted route might be for you. If you're more interested in just doing maybe a short tour, I don't want to steer you away from the officer side, but it's definitely 100% more political. So if you know you're just wanting to kind of just get in and serve your country and get your hands dirty a little bit more, then the enlisted side, from my point of view, is a little bit more for you. Now, if you're more for, if you have your degree, you're really into managing people, you want to climb the ranks, you're into definitely running programs, being that go-to person, being in charge, then being an officer is more for you. For my personality, I've always been in leadership positions. I've always usually been cheer captain, sorority president, head of groups, head of clubs. Like, that's usually what I do. So I think I would have had a really hard time if I would have enlisted. And plus, there is the biggest difference between enlisted versus officer, and I'm gonna keep it real with you guys, is the pay. The pay is much, much higher as a second lieutenant versus like an airman basic. So if you're just starting out, you have no degree, no nothing, you're gonna start out at the lowest rank in the military structure. And I don't want to keep referring to airmen because this applies to all branches. If you want to apply as an officer, obviously you have to have your bachelor's degree as a minimum. But the pay is a lot better. You get to live on base as a priority. A lot more things are more of a priority for you. However, you do not get a clothing allowance like the enlisted do every single year. You get zero. When you go to OTS, when you go to COT, you're expected to drop like $2,000 to $3,000 on your uniforms. My dad bought my uniforms as a graduation gift. So he definitely, thank you God for that, because my uniforms total with everything, like name tape, just the basic stuff, was $3,000. And my dad bought me a lot of my winter gear because I live in such a cold climate. But everything rang up to about $3,000, which is huge. So officer versus enlisted is a very, very hard sometimes decision to make, but you really need to think about, do you want to be leading the front from the very beginning, or do you kind of want to be more hands-on, worker bee first, and then once you make rank, you'll become more leadership positions. And I do want to stress on that, being enlisted doesn't mean you have to be like doing the grunt work. Because sometimes as an officer, I've already experienced doing work that I never thought I would be doing. Not because I'm an officer, but just because yeah, that's all I can basically say. But being an enlisted member, obviously you get more time to do the hands-on work, to focus on one job, really, and then you'll make rank and you'll get into more of a management position. Because when it comes to a flight, you have a officer and you have one senior enlisted. So I am the flight commander of my flight. I am in charge of them, but I also have a senior enlisted member who is the flight chief. And my flight chief is a female, so we are in charge together of an entire flight of people. So that is kind of our district. Obviously, when she first started, when she first joined, she wasn't a flight chief. She wasn't in any managerial positions. Once you make rank, and as you make rank, you'll enter certain tiers of structure of rank where you can supervise and manage more personnel. And I think the biggest decision too, also is just to think about, what do you want in the overall long run of your career? Do you want to be a manager? Do you want to do that right away? Do you want to work and get your degree first? Or do you want to kind of focus on one job, get your hands dirty, be able to learn something one at a time, and then as you make rank, you know, it starts to vary? Because that's the difference with an officer. I feel like there's so much more political aspects to it. I'm not just a junior healthcare administrator, essentially a medical service corps officer. I have to learn all of the politics of stuff. I have to learn all the military rules. I'm expected to go to certain events. I'm expected to show face at certain things. You're expected as an officer of a much more higher caliber. Now, that is to say though, if you do go the enlisted route, once you start hitting tech sergeant and above all the way through to chief, you are expected pretty much the same caliber as an officer. Only difference is with an officer, it's right out the gate, there's expectations. And with an enlisted member, it's kind of like you get a little bit more time to have fun versus an officer. So other than that, that's pretty much the biggest difference. There's different types of uniforms with an officer. Obviously we have like bars and stuff, and enlisted members have the enlisted pattern on their sleeve, so that's the biggest difference when it comes to rank. But honestly, it's all about you as an individual. Do not let a recruiter push you into a path that you don't want. I've seen a lot of recruiters push people who have degrees, they're smart, they're motivated, and to joining as an enlisted person because they can transfer into an officer position a lot faster. That may be true in some career fields, but I've ran into so many people already who they're still enlisted and they're dang good airmen. They deserve to be officers, but they signed over as an enlisted airman just because their recruiter told them that they would be in charge of things. I'm here to tell you that's a lie, and don't listen to people like that. Honestly, everyone works for some sort of commission. It may not be monetary value because everyone who's in the military, we make salary, but there is points and different things that you can get the more people you enlist versus officer. I even remember my recruiter telling me, oh, I could enlist faster and go get in right away versus officer. It did take me a year and a half to finally get through as an officer just because of the application interview process, and honestly the military is all about hurry up to wait. But I'm so glad I didn't listen to her and I went in as an officer because I love being an officer and I truly do love my job. Yeah, like I said, I've seen so many people where they tell me, you know, I have my bachelor's or I have my master's and I really wanted to be an officer, but my recruiter, you know, told me if I enlisted I could cross over as an officer so much faster. And like I said, sometimes that's true. Sometimes because they'll reserve so many slots for what they call priors, which are prior enlisted, and they want to commission as officers. But most of the time, you have to get released from your MAJCOM chief enlisted personnel, which is basically a person who oversees your entire career because there's so many different career fields. So I'm medical, right? Just imagine if I was enlisted and my chief said, you know what? We really are hurting. I'm not going to release you to commission. So the only choices you have are to like completely separate and get out of the military, get out of your career field that you love, or basically just keep working as an enlisted airman until a position finally opens up and they say, you know what, I'll go ahead and release you to commission. So it really all depends on timing 100%, and it all depends on the person who's in charge. So if you really want to go as an officer, take the chance, go as an officer. If you don't make it, you can always go as enlisted, or maybe, you know, just things just didn't work out for you and the military is just not something that you can get into. There's a lot of things that, you know, I wish I knew beforehand, but there's a lot of things that I absolutely love about my position and I love about the military. So nothing is perfect, nothing is greener on the other sides. There's pros and cons to joining for either ranks, but one thing that I always tell people is go for exactly what you want, because if you get the opportunity, take it. If you get a chance to come in as maybe a second career field that you wanted to do as an officer, take it. If you find out the officer world isn't working for you, I have met a few individuals, very, very rare, who started out as officers and preferred to be enlisted actually, just because they love being worker bees. Because like I said, as an officer, you got to take the politics with it, you got to take all the meetings, you got to take all the responsibility. It is all on you. So if you love that type of thing, go join as an officer, and that goes across all branches. If you love being enlisted, you love working on one specific job, I can't stress this enough, then maybe enlisted structure is more for you. Yes, officers make more money, but there's a lot of things that come with that money. Not all money is good money, as they say. In my case, it is good money, but like I said, there's pros and cons to each structure. So hopefully this video helped you guys decide if you wanted to be enlisted versus officer. If you have any more questions or you want me to film more videos, I can do that for you on the military side, giving you guys tips and tricks and even telling you guys about my story and how I decided to join. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you like these videos. And if you want to hear more about my military stuff, just comment down below so that way I can keep making them. Otherwise, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye!